"Excuse me, I'm not leaving." That was all she said, 5 words. Quiet, firm, unexpected. And just like that, the air in the boardroom changed. Nobody looked up when she entered. She was just the woman with the cleaning cart, the same one who'd been rolling through those glass hallways for over a decade. To them, she was part of the furniture, invisible, replaceable. But that day she didn't refill the water pitchers. She didn't wipe the table. She reached into her cart and then pulled out a folder that would tear the walls down from the inside. They had no idea who she really was. Not yet, but by the time she finished speaking, the most powerful man in the building would be gone. Escorted out by security, his face drained of color, his legacy in ruins. And in his place, the woman they never saw coming. Thank you for being here. Sometimes, the smallest moments carry the greatest meaning. Today's story is one of those. Quiet, powerful, and worth remembering. If it touches your heart, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like more stories like this, you're warmly invited to subscribe and tap the bell so you won't miss the next one. Now let's take a closer look at what really happened. It started the same way it always did. 6:32 a.m. The freight elevator chimed, and June Ellington rolled her cleaning cart across the marble floor of Whitmore Tower's south entrance, just as she'd done every weekday morning for the past 11 years. No one looked up. The security guard at the desk, Dennis, gave a nod, barely. The receptionist was too busy scrolling her phone to notice the woman in the forest green uniform moving silently past the double glass doors. To them, she was just June, the cleaning lady. Another piece of background noise. She didn't seem to mind. Didn't speak unless spoken to. Didn't make small talk or complain. Just moved with a kind of slow, sturdy grace, polishing glass, dusting corner tables, wiping down fingerprint, smudged door handles left behind by people who never learned her name. But that morning, something was different. June's cart looked the same. Her uniform looked the same. But the way she pushed that cart, it wasn't tired. It was measured. Like she was counting the steps. Like she had somewhere to be. And something to do. The headquarters of Lockwell and Pierce Capital sat high in downtown Cincinnati. A sleek, steel, and glass monument to modern finance. Magazine features called it the nerve center of Midwestern venture capital. But June, she saw something different. She saw desperation in the interns trying to dress older. She saw arrogance in the partners who never looked her in the eye. She saw power move through the air like Kalan, strongest in the conference rooms, but always floating near the elevator banks, where decisions were whispered behind turned backs, and she never said a word, but she saw it all. June was 57. She had 2 grown children, a modest apartment in the Clifton area, and a pension plan she never expected to touch. She was thin but sturdy, with steel, gray hair always tied back into a no-nonsense bun, and quiet eyes that missed nothing. Most people at Lockwell and Pierce didn't even know she was widowed. Even fewer knew that her late husband, Harold Ellington, had once been the firm's first major investor, back when the office had fewer than 12 people and the desks were made of pine and borrowed time. But Harold died early, a heart attack in his sleep, and the shares he'd quietly accumulated over 2 decades, he left them to her. For a while, June did nothing with them. She didn't even understand the full scope of what she owned. To her, they were paper. Memories. Reminders of a man who believed in things that no longer seemed to exist in the modern world. But every morning, as she pushed her cart past glass offices and overheard snatches of conversations, she learned. And the more she learned, the more she understood the thing Harold had tried to build, was no longer what it claimed to be. The CEO, Douglas Kincaid, was in his mid-40s and sharp as a whip, too sharp. He liked to talk fast and smile slow. He had the kind of voice that filled rooms and the kind of handshake that squeezed too long. People feared him. He liked that. He joked about dead weight in meetings. He referred to the janitorial staff as the mop squad. And once, June had overheard him say about a woman in HR, "Doesn't matter how good her numbers are. If she doesn't look the part, she doesn't get promoted. Image is everything." She kept cleaning. But inside she started counting. The culture at Lockwell and Pierce was rotten from the top. Expenses were inflated, bonuses reallocated to executives under fake performance, metrics. Promising young analysts were fired for asking the wrong questions. And just last month, June had walked into the break room and found a second-year intern crying in the corner because she had been screamed at in front of a client over someone else's mistake. June handed her a tissue, said nothing, but she remembered. There's a kind of pain that comes with being invisible. Not the dramatic kind. Not loud. Just the slow erosion of dignity over time. People walked past her like she wasn't real. Like she was part of the wall. She'd once been elbowed aside by a man who didn't even glance up from his Bluetooth call. But June never complained. She absorbed. She cataloged. She became, over time, something more than just a silent observer. She became a vault. And this vault had started to fill. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening. It was after hours, and June had just finished mopping the executive lounge when she overheard two senior partners laughing over glasses of scotch. You think the board will care? Please. They're too busy counting dividends. Layoffs are easy. You just pick the quiet ones and nobody notices. They laughed. That was the moment. June didn't move. Didn't make a sound. But something in her chest clicked. She was done storing. It was time to act. That night at her kitchen table, she pulled out a yellow legal pad and began to write. Not a rant. Not a diary. A plan. The next morning, Lockwell and Pierce felt the same on the surface. Elevators chimed. Keycards beeped. Baristas delivered overpriced coffees with soy foam and motivational stickers. But June Ellington was no longer just the woman with the cart. She moved through the building with practiced calm, but her mind was sharper than ever. Listening, tracking, recording. Every loose page left on a desk, every careless remark in the elevator, every meeting that ended with doors half closed and voices still too loud, she logged it. It was remarkable what people revealed when they thought no one was watching. She wasn't hacking, wasn't stealing, she was simply watching, a skill far rarer in that building than anyone realized. Every day, June saw the same people. And they saw her. Or rather, they saw through her. That was her power. She started building a mental grid. Who talked to whom, who left early on Fridays, whose office smelled like bourbon by 11 a.m. She noticed the shifts in tone when someone passed a hallway camera. She noticed which floors buzzed before performance reviews and which assistants booked travel to Cancun days before budget cuts were announced. It was all there, in plain sight. People weren't careful because they didn't think they needed to be. June didn't trust many, but she had a few names. First was Carla Simmons, a former accountant who'd been let go after reporting a $60,000 discrepancy in a financial audit. June had given her a call one afternoon. Carla answered on the second ring. Who is this? Someone who remembers. That's all June said. Carla didn't hang up. Then came Martin Vale, a retired securities lawyer who used to have lunch with her late husband once a month. He remembered June immediately. He hadn't seen her in years. You're calling about Lockwell? Yes. I always wondered when someone would. They spoke for over an hour. Within 3 weeks, June had built a small but strong circle. Former employees, analysts, silent observers who'd seen too much and said too little. They were ready now. In her supply closet, behind a false wall near the mop rack, June kept a thin black binder. Inside it were notes handwritten in neat block letters, copies of discarded memos, printed emails she'd picked up from the copy room shredder, uncut, carelessly tossed. She didn't need to break laws. She just needed to pay attention. There were line items that didn't match. Receipts for client retreats that were clearly personal vacations. Performance reviews with dates changed. HR complaints time-stamped and erased. And at the heart of it all, Douglas Kincaid. His signature was on nearly every policy that rewarded profit at the cost of people. His name kept showing up in expense approvals for consultants who had no business address. His voice, recorded unintentionally on a forgotten voicemail, was caught saying, "If we cut from the bottom 10%, nobody will cry. They're not our brand anyway." June didn't sleep much that week. She kept her routine, showed up early, smiled softly, clean like always. But behind the calm eyes was someone ready to step into the fire. Her legal team had reviewed the bylaws. As majority shareholder, she had the right to bring forward motions, including leadership votes, if enough evidence warranted it. And the board, they wouldn't be able to dismiss her, not legally. Not this time, because she was the board. In the staff kitchen, a junior associate, barely 22, was crying quietly by the vending machine. June didn't ask why. She already knew. The girl had been blamed for an account error she didn't make. Her mentor had thrown her under the bus to save face. When June handed her a tissue, the girl whispered, "Thank you, Mrs." She trailed off. She didn't know June's last name. That was the last quiet moment. Douglas was at his usual place, corner office, skyline view, a bourbon tumbler on his desk by 4 p.m. He didn't notice the sealed envelope slipped into his assistant's inbox. Inside was a formal shareholder motion, request for executive review, cause ethical misconduct, attached summary of financial discrepancies. A full report, signed by the controlling shareholder. At first, Douglas laughed. "Is this a prank?" he asked, tossing the folder across the desk. But his laughter stopped when he saw the signature June Ellington. His hand gripped the paper. He looked toward the hallway window. Oh, and for the first time in his career, he felt something rare in his chest. A hint of fear. June stayed home. She made soup. She called her daughter. She watered the potted basil on the kitchen windowsill. But in the evening, she sat at the table, pulled out the binder, and practiced. She didn't rehearse words. She rehearsed presence, the strength in her posture, the clarity in her gaze. She wasn't going in there to prove her worth. She was going in because she already knew it. Monday morning. The lobby smelled like lemon polish and espresso beans. Executives streamed in with cufflinks gleaming and voices high with confidence. Today was the annual shareholders' meeting. A day meant for applause, projections, and champagne, and not a single one of them saw what was coming. June Ellington arrived through the side entrance, just like always. Same green uniform. Same cleaning cart. Same calm expression. Only this time, there was a folder tucked beneath the fresh linen stack. And this time, she didn't stop on the lower floors. Floor by floor, the numbers lit up 9, 10, 11, or 12 hours as she passed the marketing department, past finance, past HR. People barely glanced as she moved by, still blind to her, still mistaking her silence for insignificance. But June wasn't there to clean. She was there to be seen. It was a sea of polished shoes, tailored blazers, and thin smiles. The long mahogany table gleamed like a monument. Floor to ceiling windows cast a golden morning light over the skyline. At the head of the table sat Douglas Kincaid, CEO of Lockwell & Pierce, wearing a gray suit worth more than June's car. The meeting had just begun. "Let's start with performance metrics," Douglas said smoothly, flipping his notes. "We're proud to announce another record year." People nodded. One board member clapped once, awkwardly. That's when the side door opened, and June entered. No one looked up. She rolled in a water pitcher, placed a tray of glasses on the side table. Routine familiar. But instead of leaving, she turned to the table and said, clear, calm, "Excuse me, I have something to say." The room stilled. Douglas didn't even glance up. "Now's not the time, June." "It is," she said softly, "because I'm not here as your cleaning lady today." Heads turned. Slowly, one by one, she reached into her cart and pulled out a binder, set it on the center of the table. On the cover, the Lockwell & Pierce emblem. Beneath it, majority shareholder motion to remove CEO. Douglas laughed. "Come on. Let's not." June met his eyes for the first time in years. "You don't know who I am, but you should." "June, this isn't." "My husband, Harold Ellington, was your first investor. He believed in you before anyone else did. When he died, he left me his shares. Over time, I accumulated more. Quietly, patiently." A silence fell over the table. "I own 51%, she said. "I didn't come here to clean up. I came here to clean out." You could hear the breath leave Douglas's lungs. Someone dropped a pen. June opened the binder, turned pages with methodical grace, presented line items, expense reports, emails, policies, all highlighting ethical breaches, misuse of funds, and wrongful terminations. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Each word was a hammer. Each sentence cracked the marble floor of confidence beneath Douglas's shoes. One board member reached for the binder, flipping quickly. This can't be real." June simply nodded. It is, I've had time. A lot of it. Douglas tried to interrupt. You're just invisible. June cut in, voice still soft. That's what made this possible. You never saw me. So I saw everything. She turned to the rest of the board. I moved for a vote. There was no shouting. Just the slow sound of minds catching up to truth. One by one, they looked at her, then at the folder, then at Douglas. And the hands went up. 6 out of 9. Enough. Douglas stood, jaw clenched, eyes burning. This is outrageous. No, June said, picking up her card again. This is overdue. Security arrived within minutes. Douglas was asked to surrender his key card. As he walked out, he looked back. Once. June didn't blink. The room sat in stunned silence for a full 30 seconds after Douglas left. Then applause. Not loud, not performative, but sincere. The CFO stood up. Ms. Ellington, what happens now? June glanced at the binder and then at the window. Now, we rebuild. By Tuesday morning, Lockwell and Pierce Capital was a different place. The hallways were quieter, not with fear, but with thought. Executives walked with smaller strides. Assistants no longer whispered behind closed doors. Even the elevator chime sounded different. Because everyone knew. The cleaning lady wasn't the cleaning lady. She was the new face of power. And no one had seen it coming. The news spread through the building like light flooding a darkened hall. She was here every day. She knew all our names. I think I might have yelled at her once. A regret seeped into casual conversations. Not just because people felt guilty, but because they were finally starting to see her and themselves. Even the ones who had mocked her now lowered their voices when she walked past. Not out of fear, but out of respect. June noticed. But she didn't dwell on it. She had work to do. June didn't take Douglas's office. She kept using her supply closet, now repurposed into a temporary planning room. Old habits. She smiled when asked, but her clipboard was full. She didn't need a title to lead. She needed resolve, and she had plenty. Her first order of business, the people. She called a town hall. No suits, no prepared statements. Just a folding chair, a microphone, and an invitation to speak. It was the first time in company history that interns, cleaning staff, and senior partners sat in the same room. Equally heard. We forgot why we started, she said gently. We became so obsessed with margins that we lost our meaning. But that ends now. She met with every department, walked the floors she used to mop, shook hands with people who once avoided her. She introduced a third-party ethics committee, empowered HR to act independently, and created a pay review board, with cleaning staff, mailroom workers, and receptionists all holding voting seats. The people who were once invisible, were now holding pens that mattered. June also announced raises for all janitorial, administrative, and support staff. Some tried to argue the budget. She smiled. You managed to find funds for helicopter golf trips. I think we can fund decency. Nobody objected after that. One afternoon, while walking past the third-floor lounge, June heard a soft voice, Ms. Ellington. She turned. It was the young intern, the one who'd spilled coffee near Douglas's office all those months ago. He stood nervously, holding a notepad, eyes wide. Thank you, he said, for everything. I don't know if I belong here, but after what you did. June smiled. You do belong. Just remember, no one decides your value based on your title. Not anymore. He nodded, tears close. That moment stayed with him forever. It had been weeks now. The office had shifted. People paused before sending harsh emails. Supervisors asked questions, not just gave orders. And the cleaning staff, they were no longer ghosts. They laughed. They lingered. They wore new uniforms, picked by them, stitched with their names. Their real names. June stood once more at the window of the top floor. Cincinnati stretched before her, skyscrapers shining in late afternoon gold. She looked down, not at the city, but at her reflection in the glass. Older now. Wiser. Still invisible in some ways, but not to herself. June never claimed credit. She never gave interviews. When Forbes called, she declined. I didn't do this for applause, she told one employee quietly. I did it because it was time. But she did allow one photo to be taken, her sitting at her old cleaning cart, now placed in the lobby like a museum piece. Next to it hung a plaque. In honor of June Ellington, she cleaned our floors and swept away our blindness. A month later, a letter arrived for every employee, typed, signed with ink. If you feel invisible today, remember that strength doesn't need volume. Power doesn't always enter loud. Sometimes it enters with a mop and a folder, and sometimes it looks a lot like you. She left the building that evening not to disappear, but to start something new. Sometimes, the strongest person in the room is the one nobody notices. Not the one at the head of the table, not the one speaking the loudest, but the one who's been watching, waiting, listening. June Ellington taught us that silence is not weakness. That dignity can live quietly, even under fluorescent lights and ignored greetings. She reminded us that power doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes it wears worn sneakers and carries a mop. But more than that, she proved something deeper. That being unseen does not mean being powerless. That justice, when it comes softly, can still shake the walls. And that the world can and should belong to those who lead with patience, not pride. So if you've ever felt invisible, at work, in life, in your family, know this: you matter. You don't need to shout to make change. You just need to stand your ground when it counts. Because the world doesn't change when the powerful speak, when it changes when the silent finally rise. If June's story touched your heart, please let us know. Leave a comment below, especially if you've ever been in her shoes. And if you'd like more quiet stories that carry big truths, you're warmly invited to subscribe and tap the bell. We're building a space here for the people nobody saw coming, just like her. Thank you for listening and remembering.